the best judges I can possibly get and the most diverse array of experience that I can get. So we're going to bring in all the best judges we possibly can. The emphasis, as ever, for judging a competition has to be on quality. We're looking at balance. We're looking at the character of the beer more so than, okay, does this line up specifically to these style attributes? I'm not as concerned about that as I'm concerned with how the beer is going down for the judges, really. It's not about personal preference, it's about objectively looking at a beer. Is it balanced? Does it have character? Does it convey what the style suggests? If it's off a couple of degrees in color, or it's got a little more or a little less alcohol, I think that's less important than the idea that it typifies what somebody looking at that style of beer might be thinking about. So that's that process or portion of the judging. You may be wondering a bit about how we do it. Because last year, while I would have loved to have a little extra leeway and time to get some independent observers in, some media in, I didn't, plain and simple. So what I'm going to do is just tell you a little bit about how we judge at the Canada Beer Cup. So first of all, the judging tables are made up of 3 judges each. I would ideally will eventually expand that to maybe 4 or 5 judges. But each judge, of course, has a cost associated with the judge, whether that's feeding them or accommodating them or helping with their travel. So we try to get 3 judges per table. If we can manage to get a few more in, so much the better, but a minimum of 3 judges per table. And each table has a table captain. That table captain is tasked with keeping the judging uniform, which is not to say we ever want one judge to overwhelm another judge or try to intimidate another judge into giving a higher or lower score. But by simple fact of the way that people experience beer, some people have better understanding of certain styles than other people. Some people just take to a style more so than somebody else. And so it's important to have the captain there to say, oh, do you understand this style? Well, okay, maybe I can give you a little education on that, a quick kind of précis on what you should be looking for. One example I can give you is that time that I was judging down in Santiago, Chile, and I was asked to be the table captain for the Flanders Red Ale category. And I looked at my 2 guys who I was judging with, both of them BJCP, but they weren't too strong on the beer style. And so I wanted to just give them a little extra information, just kind of help guide them along. And I took advantage of a Belgian judge who was a good friend of mine who happened to be wandering by the table while we were doing this judging. And I had him add a few words of explanation about what this style really should be. And it turns out we ended up with an outstanding beer in that category that went on to win Best of Show. If that education, that additional educational component had not happened, it's entirely possible that would not have happened. That beer would not have advanced and would not have gotten to win a very, very well-deserved Best of Show. So that the table captain's role is very important, and all the table captains have me as a resource as well. So I'm not judging myself. I spend my time wandering around the judging area, speeding up tables if that's necessary, because some tables will take longer to judge than others, and just answering any inquiries, making sure that everybody's on the same page, and just generally keeping things running smoothly. So that's my focus as the head judge. Which brings us to what happens after the judging. One of the beautiful things about this BAP system that we're using for judging now, which is all online, directly into their computers, directly into the database, The information from the judge's comments that you receive as brewers is verbatim. It's not edited. It comes straight through the server and right to you as soon as the announcement of the winners have been made. So it really is a great system in that regard. I spoke to a lot of brewers after the competition last year, and there was a lot of really satisfied customers as far as the feedback goes. Incidentally, I just saw in the chat, a question came up, and I'm going to be talking about answering questions later on. I just wanted to get the overview out of the way, but it means, do we taste blind? And yes, we absolutely taste blind. There's no knowledge of what is happening, and judges are free to discuss after they've all judged, not before. So the idea of talking about after the judging is done is, again, to make sure that everybody's on the same stylistic page, that there's not somebody who really misinterprets the style and therefore has given a very low score compared to everyone else who thought it was a higher score. So we don't know who made the beer. We don't know what the name of the beer is. All we know is that it fit the style criteria. And in the entry form, this is an important aspect of crafting your entry. On the entry form, there is an information section, and that goes directly to the judges. So if there is information about your beer that you want to know more about, then, or you want the judges to know more about, then you should fill out that information category and let people know. For example, I had a question the other day from a brewer who uses herbs and spices in all of their beers, but that's not the defining characteristic of the beer. And my advice to him was to enter the beer in its style category, but in that information box, add the fact that you're using this one specific herb or these two specific spices to add character to the beer, but not to define the beer. So the beer is defined by its style, and then you add that information in the information box. So that's a very good utility. I think that brewers in general are very excited about getting feedback, and with the quality of our judges who we have working for us, I think you're getting some really, really good, solid feedback. So I hope that that answers most questions. Of course, we're going to have Q&A coming up in just a little while. But that's just a general overview of the judging. It's what I do. It's what the judges do. The judges, I should add, take this very seriously. We're not messing around. They're long days. Judging beer is extremely hard work. We all joke about it afterwards because everyone says, oh yeah, you just go somewhere and you drink a lot of beer. It's exhausting. It is mentally exhausting, which is why I make sure that the number of beers judged over the course of the day is kept relatively low. We will not go over 40 per session, and that session morning and afternoon. Judges are encouraged to take their time with beers and to make sure that they're getting the assessment made as well as they possibly can to the best of their ability. And as I said, it is exhausting. It's something that everyone takes very seriously so that we can give you the best response and the best input about your beer at the end of the competition. And that's it.
Thanks so much, Stephen. That was a great overview. My name is Hilary Hochstein. I'm the competition manager for the 2023 Canada Beer Cup. And I'm just going to go over a couple of the logistics and details that might be helpful to know. So entries are now open for 2023 Canada Beer Cup, and early bird ends on Monday. So if you like to leave things till the last minute, go ahead and consider this the last minute. It's a great time to get your entries in. Entries are currently $102, and on Monday they'll go up to regular pricing at $125. As Christine mentioned, all proceeds from the Canada Beer Cup do fund the association, and this year $2 from every entry is going to directly support the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts of our Inclusion and Anti-Discrimination Committee. So that is a really exciting new addition for this year. If you miss out on the early bird window, regular price entries will be open until May 19th. We've had some questions of folks saying, I don't know what beers are going to be ready in the fall, and so they're a little bit unsure of what they should enter. Entries can be modified. So what I would suggest doing is entering your beers while you can take advantage of the early bird pricing, and then you can go ahead and change both the name and style right up until September. So if you're not sure what you're going to be brewing, you could enter a placeholder for now, and then just change it when you know what's in your tanks. By entering them now, that also gives you the opportunity to plan your brew schedule and brew a fresh batch right before you submit your beers to the awards, which a lot of our breweries really love to do, so that they're sending the best quality product into the competition to be judged. There will be East Coast and West Coast consolidation points this year, as there was last year. So the beer will be due mid-September at those consolidation points, or you can ship it directly to the central warehouse in Ontario. We will be announcing more details of both the consolidation points and the central warehouse shortly. And so you'll have lots of time in advance of September to get things prepared and packed up. When it is time to pack your beers, right on the Beer Awards platform where you entered your submissions, you can print a QR code. So go ahead and print that off, fix it to your beer. We really suggest using tape or like a sticky adhesive label so that it doesn't get lost and fall off. And then go ahead and pack up 4 of 473 mil packaging style, or 6 if it's 355s. Please don't send more or less. And if you're sending growlers, you can send 2 growlers per style. So that is all that I have for our logistics. I also wanted to mention that this year, as a new addition to the competition, the winner of the Best in Show will not only receive the gorgeous Canada Beer Cup trophy that's currently on display at Callister Brewing. They won our inaugural competition for their Wee Heavy Laird brew. So that will be awarded to the Best in Show winner this year, and you will also receive 1 entry into the World Beer Cup Awards of 2024. So it's a little extra incentive to really go for that Best in Show, put your best beer forward, and it's an exciting addition that we have for this year to be working with the World Beer Cup in that way. So with that, we can go ahead and move into Q&A. I know there was some questions coming in the chat, so go ahead and put those directly in the chat, or there's also the Q&A button that you can press there. I've also wanted to point out that Andrew has included some information. If you want to learn more about Gallagher and their services, they have placed a link in the chat there, or go ahead and place your email in the chat, and Andrew can reach out to you directly with more information on what Gallagher is able to provide to our breweries. So I'll give a couple minutes for people to put their questions in the chat, and while we do that, let me just see here. I've got a question from Greg. It says, for beers that are being entered into the base category and the feature category, should we send twice as many containers for sampling? Stephen, the answer to that would be yes, right? Oh, I believe you're muted.
No, you're the logistic person, Hillary, but I'd say yes. The reason we ask for so much beer, and honestly, we're trying to minimize the amount of beer that we're asking you all for. But there is a possibility, we have to account for every possibility. So if you're in, say, a very popular IPA category, there's every possibility that we will need to judge you twice just to get through that category, and then once to get through the next phase of the judging, and then once in best of show. And then if one of those cans or bottles has something happen to it, all of a sudden we're down to bare bones. And we want to make sure that every time the beer is judged, it's judged in the best possible condition. So that's why we have to ask for so much beer, because there are several stages to judging till we get to best of show. And we have to assume that everybody has the same opportunity to get to best of show. So we need all that beer so that we can get your beer to the final round.
Thanks, Stephen. Adrian says, Stephen, I have so many questions from this session. Can you give me a list of sources where I can learn about? Not sure what you mean by sources, Adrian. I don't know if you wanted to clarify a little bit more, or I can put an email in the chat if you wanted to. I'll put an email in the chat. If you've got more questions that don't get addressed during this session, I will place the contact email so that you can reach out with if they're very specific questions related to your category.
So, I mean, I have no problem recommending the World Atlas of Beer 3rd edition. Yeah, there's I'm happy. I'm easy to find on the internet. If you want to just send an email to the CCBA, they will forward it to me as well. So if you have any specific questions about specific categories, you can reach me that way. So I'm always happy to answer those questions for you.
Thanks, Stephen. And I know you talked a little bit about the category consolidation. If a brewery, let's say that they meddled in a specific category last year that no longer exists this year, what would you suggest for them to do?
Yeah, as I said, there were a few categories that were eliminated last year, and they were all very, very low entry categories. I'd say probably the most controversial one is the Old World Pale Ale. Because as with the IPAs, I've tried to divide each category into Old World, meaning traditional kind of old school hops that you'd find back in the 70s, 80s, and the New World hops that we're all using now. I mean, the number of hops available to brewers has multiplied by I don't know how many times in the last 20 years. So that whole tropical hop characteristic that is so popular these days, that would be the New World side. In the Pale Ale category, there were basically next to no entries. And so what I've done is I've created a single Pale Ale category, but Pale Ales, again, they will be judged as the beers, not as how they leap out of the glass or how they, we have judges who might even prefer an Old World Pale Ale as opposed to a New World. So we do have some idea of what we're getting into as judges when we're approaching that type of beer. I mean, one sniff can tell you whether it's old school or new school, and the judges are going to judge that beer accordingly on its own merits. That said, if you had an Old World Pale Ale that you entered last year, you don't know where to put it this year, you don't want it going up against a bunch of juicy Pale Ales, you can opt to put it into the British style best bitter category. English style best bitter, ESB, or Pale Ale. So that is a category that you can easily sit in there. The difference between a best bitter and an old school English style Pale Ale, I know English beer experts who can't actually tell you the difference. My mentor, Michael Jackson, used to say that one was draft and one was bottle. So they easily fit into the same category. We eliminated the other Belgian style dark ale. And that can easily, we modified one of the strong categories to be Belgian style dark strong ale. So any beer that was entered back there can easily go into that category. And there's also double and other Belgian style dark ales for the less strength ones or lesser strength ones. Of course, anything blonde, you've got the Belgian style triple or other Belgian style strong golden ale for paler versions. Dortmunder Export was incorporated in with Helles Münchner. Again, judges will be judging those beers on their merits. You're not going to end up with your Dortmunder judged against the Helles. As long as you let us know what it is, the judges will know how to assess it. North American style dark lager received 0 entries last year. So we've amalgamated that with the American style amber lagers into one category. Same with German style Doppelweizenbock and other strong wheat beers. We received 0 entries in that, much to my chagrin, because I love Doppelweizenbocks. So that's been incorporated into the Dunkelweizen category. So again, letting us know what you're submitting and what the style is important so that the judges know how to approach it. We got rid of two low or no alcohol categories, the wheat beer and the porter or stout, which combined had all of 3 entries last year. So we now have other low or no alcohol beer. And again, important to let us know what the beer style is when you're entering into that category so that judges know how to approach it. And those were the eliminated categories. We've also added some categories this year. So we've got a flavored IPA category. There seem to be a lot of those around. So I figured it was time to incorporate that. I've got a Brett style or Brett Brettanomyces influenced beer category. That comes in I think the last category, which is specialty and flavored. So I've got that. No, it's not in there. Just a second. Bear with me. Wild and mixed fermentation category, of course. So this Brettanomyces fermented beer. This should be a beer that is principally or exclusively fermented with Brettanomyces. We want to have the impact of the Brett in evidence in that category. So those are the 2 big new categories that we've created.
Great. Just checking if there's any. Oh, okay. How do you judge? Add history of the judging criteria. How do you? So I think he's just asking for what's the judging criteria.
Judging criteria, as I said before, it's pretty straightforward. We're looking at the quality of the beer itself in terms of what it's presenting to the judges. For what I would always say to any judge, I mean, obviously I don't have to say this to the kind of quality caliber judges that we get in for the Canada Beer Cup, but if someone's asking me, I'd say balance is important. You can have a massively hoppy beer or a massively tart beer, but it should be balanced out with other characteristics. One example I always use for that is Russian River's Pliny the Elder. If you've ever had a chance to try that beer down in California, Pliny is without any question a very intensely hopped beer. However, it has such a good malt backbone that it doesn't attack your palate. It is really, really an impressively balanced beer, even with all those hops. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about balance. We're talking about structure. A beer should, have aromatics. It should have a palate start, a mid palate, and a finish. Those are all things that you might not get in a kind of a hastily produced beer by a large company, but this is what we're looking for. We're looking for that complexity. Even in a relatively simple beer style, as Helles or a Svetny Leshak, we're looking for some complexity of character that come through in that beer. And then, of course, style guidelines. We want something that generally fits within the style constraints. And does not, again, it kind of goes back to balance. It doesn't overwhelm other characteristics of the beer with a single characteristic. We do want a lot going on in the beer. We want to be able to taste the style. We want to be able to taste the nuance and the character of every single beer. So I hope that answers that.
Great. Another question here. How do you become a beer judge?
You drink a lot. Beer judging is really a matter of practice. So, if you have aspirations to become a beer judge, I would say there are regional competitions that are always looking for people to apprentice. I know a lot of competitions will have special apprenticeship programs for bringing on young judges. Sometimes it just means that they're judging alongside the more veteran judges, but their scores don't count. But it's a learning process. Of course, you've got Cicerone certification, you've got the Prud'homme certification. There are a lot of ways you can learn about how to judge beer. through courses now, things that didn't exist when I started all this in the late 1980s. So it really is a matter of experience, of learning to taste, which is a big thing. North Americans are better at it than we used to be, but we're not really good tasters. We tend to eat and drink without paying enormous amounts of attention to the nuance and the kind of structure of what we're eating and drinking. So yeah, that's part of it. I mean, certainly it was for me, and every day I become a slightly better taster because I'm continuing to make notes, continuing to practice. If you try to stop learning, then it's through. You're done. You always got to keep learning and keep experiencing.
Thank you. Okay, and I know you touched on this a little bit with the judging criteria, but the next question is, what is looked for as a good beer?
Well, it's a beer that it's a little cliched, but it's a beer that makes you sit up and take notice. I have judged so many times where you've got 4 or 6 beers in front of you, and the first thing you do is you nose all of them, and one of them stands out, and you got to go, wow, that's more intense, that's more complex, that's got more going on in it. Many times I've said, wow, I could just spend all afternoon smelling this beer. If a beer stands out like that, that's where you're looking for a complexity of aroma, complexity of flavor, balance, just the kind of thing that makes anything in food or drink stand out, that really something that captures your attention, focuses your imagination, makes you think this is really good. And it's something that it is to a certain degree a judgment call, of course. But we as beer judges try our best to be as objective as we can. So we're looking for not what appeals to our palate specifically, but what is just the best objective standard for this specific style of beer.
Great, making me thirsty. How do old world beer judges eliminate their bias for new world beer?
That's just a matter of being a professional. I was asked last year in an interview what different qualities that make up a good beer judge, and one of the things I mentioned was patience. Even if you're not into hazy, juicy, fruity pale ales or IPAs, you should be able to recognize when one is extremely well done. And that's a matter of patience, spending some time with the beer, smelling it, tasting it, learning that it does have other characteristics to it, that it does have a complexity, and being a professional and eliminating your own bias. I used to say, when people ask me, well, what beer styles don't you like? I said, none, because that's not in the job description for me. I have to assess all beer on its own merits, whether it's in a style that I love or a style that I'm more neutral on. It's a beer that is a standout for its type. And every judge that we have, they're experienced and they're professional. And part of being professional is eliminating any personal bias and just approaching each beer on its own merits.
Great. Question here from Greg. Should any beer that is classified BJCP as specialty IPA be entered into flavored IPA? So for example, a rye IPA or a black IPA?
That's a very, very good question. And I don't have an immediate answer for that. I think, we've got the IPA styles, and I think within each of those categories, rye and black can sit more comfortably in the general IPA category than in the specialty IPA category. Flavored means flavored. So, spices, herbs, fruit, what have you. Again, that information box is your friend. If you're going up against other IPAs of 6% alcohol or 6.1 to 8%, that's one of our categories. and it's got New World hops in it, but it's a black IPA, just make sure it's listed as this is my black IPA. Give the judges the information that they need to approach the beer with the qualities that it has. And I think that's maybe in the future for next year. That's something I'll take on board, and maybe this specialty IPA section is something that should be added. But for now, I would say for a rye IPA or a black IPA, just put it into the IPA category and use that information box.
Great. So we'll give one final opportunity for folks to place any questions in the Q&A box. That's all that have come in so